Age of Empires Definitive Edition didn't exactly work out like it was supposed to, huh? It's been 6 months since the last major update to Age of Empires Definitive Edition, which was the Content Update 7. Now, first of all, content updates for Age of Empires Definitive Edition didn't actually have any content in them. They were just bug fixes that the rest of the industry calls patches, but okay, we're gonna call them content updates. And on the 17th of April, I think it was, the Content Update 7 released, and that's been pretty much it. Now, why did Age of Empires Definitive Edition fail, basically, and not do so well? Well, we're gonna get into that, and also what that means for the future of Age of Empires development. So firstly, why did it fail? Well, on launch, it wasn't really that great, and it missing a lot of features, and it still is missing a lot of features to this day. So, for example, there's no matchmaking, there's no classic mode for multiplayer or campaigns, there's no replay system or spectator system. The new visuals were kind of nice, but also kind of weird and muddy looking too. I'm not really a fan, honestly I prefer the original graphics, but you know, they put the original graphics into the game, but you can only use classic mode when you create a single player custom game. You can't use it on Why? Why no classic mode? And overall, it feels like they tried to remake the game, but they didn't fully commit to doing it, so it ended up neither here nor there. For example, farms. They redid farms so that they could be walked over in the Definitive Edition, where in the classic version they didn't. But they didn't really commit to remaking the game as a modern RTS. They just changed a few weird things and it didn't really work. So the classic mode honestly is better, but you can't use classic mode in multiplayer. And of course, it's only on the Windows Store, which is limiting. And on launch and long after till this day, as far as reports go, there's some people experiencing crashing on launch, tons of bugs, and the pathfinding wasn't really improved compared to, for example, UPatch HD. It might be better than the original, it's hard to tell, but it's not necessarily better than UPatch HD. And honestly, especially on launch, it had the worst AI I've ever seen in an RTS, ever. I mean, it was just building storage yards all over the map. The villagers wandered, like the enemy AI villagers just wandered into your base and died. And it was somehow worse than the original, I'm pretty sure. They did patch the AI, so it's better, but it's still not great. And on the topic of the AI being weird, you can see the footage on screen right now, on the hardest difficulty on the Definitive Edition version. It's better than at launch, but you can see some odd things. At the very least, they do actually try to kill their opponents at some point, and the wandering villagers is fixed. But if you see what's going on, there's little resource collection besides gold. The farmer villagers still get stuck on the farms, like there's one farming and then there's one idling on top of it because it doesn't realize that that farm is already being farmed. There's plenty of idle military units wandering around or just standing in base or just standing off to the side. There's sometimes military units which could very easily be used to defend the base, but they decide to watch the town centers get destroyed and all of that. Pathfinding still struggles even when the AI is in control. You can even see the AI has units getting stuck on each other in the pathfinding. And an odd thing is battles and military seem pretty active until it seems like all the AI run out of resources and the economies die. So it builds up to these large battles, and eventually, because I suppose the villagers aren't actually collecting resources besides gold for some reason, it doesn't collect resources. It only has a couple fishing boats, a couple farmers, and a lot of gold miners. But the economy seems to die, and the large battles become medium battles and small battles until one side eventually just runs out of resources. And even here, you can see, it will still break down to what people call storage wars. They just build storage yards all over the map. They build storage yards in the middle of the enemy base. I don't understand why this is still happening. And interestingly, it's not granaries, you know, it's just storage yards. Now, as you can see, it's still not great. And then there's rumors of funding being cut by Microsoft. So there might actually be no more funding to continue developing the game, which would make sense, but either way, whether there's funding or not, there hasn't been a content update in months. And what this means for the future of Age of Empires? Well, they were gonna do Age of Empires 2 and 3 Definitive Editions, so that's probably gonna be cancelled. And the upcoming Age of Empires 4 will most likely continue development, But since it does very much look like Age of Empires Definitive Edition failed, Microsoft will probably pressure the devs to move away from the classic approach, because it can seem like trying to revive the classic style didn't work, even though it didn't work because they did it badly. You know, I've seen this happen in the games industry quite a lot. A publisher tries to revive a classic and they do it so badly and everyone hates it, then they say, look, no one wants to play those classic kind of games anymore, and they just move away and do something completely different, using that as justification. But let's face it, Age of Empires Definitive Edition is not a great remake or revival of the original Age of Empires. And also, as a reminder, Age of Empires Definitive Edition, the release of it was delayed many months because it wasn't ready. And, you know, so they actually had extra months from the original deadline to finish the game. It was supposed to release in 2017, it released at the early 2018, and it still ended up like this. And then they had a couple months of content updates, and then they just sort of gave up. Well, overall, I think it's too late now. Let's say, even if they do fix all the bugs and implement everything that it should have had that was promised, for example, classic mode and everything, they promised that, but let's say they fixed all the bugs now and implemented everything. It's still gonna be the most exclusive game in the world, and the hype is dead. And, you know, if you haven't seen my other video, Age of Empires Definitive Edition is the most exclusive game in the world because it's not only a Windows 10 exclusive and a Windows Store exclusive, but it's a specific version of Windows 10 upwards only too. I forgot what that update was, but if you have one of the earlier versions of Windows 10 and can't upgrade for many valid reasons that can't update Windows 10, you can't run Age of Empires Definitive Edition. You know, for example, my 6-year-old PC, which isn't that old, you know, if a PC is less than 10 years old, it still should be usable. But my 6-year-old PC can't play Age of Empires Definitive Edition because it can't properly run Windows 10. You know, so of course it can't properly update Windows 10, and therefore I can't install Age of Empires Definitive Edition. It won't even let you install it. You go to the Windows Store and it just says you don't have the right version of Windows 10, you can't install it. Even though there were reports and samples of people installing the game on older versions of Windows 10, and it worked, I don't know why the limitation. And Age of Empires Definitive Edition is right now the only game I've ever bought on the Windows Store, and I'm not impressed with how Microsoft is handling game development right now, in terms of Age of Empires Definitive Edition and the other things like Sea of Thieves and all of that. It's not good enough. When you have Steam, when you have GOG, it's not good enough. So basically, I'm not going to be buying anything that's Windows Store exclusive for the foreseeable future. There's nothing really there that I want, and, you know, maybe the next game I'll give a shot with is Age of Empires 4, but, you know, here's the lesson of Age of Empires Definitive Edition. Firstly, you probably want to find a copy of the original Age of Empires and install UPatch HD. It works on Windows 10, and it's a better game in my experience. And if you want to play multiplayer for that, for the original Age of Empires, use Game Ranger or Voobly. There's still an active community there, it's the original game, it's probably more balanced, and it just feels better. And of course, with Age of Empires 4, I highly recommend that you do not pre-order Age of Empires 4. I know people get upset when I tell people not to do something, but I'm gonna say it's probably a huge risk pre-ordering Age of Empires 4. It might be great, it might be good, but we know it's most likely gonna be a Windows Store exclusive, Windows 10 exclusive, and it's made by not Forgotten Empires, and it's made by different developers, so it's probably going to be a different game, and for the reason of Age of Empires Definitive Edition not working out, they'll probably move further away from the classic approach and use that as justification. Well, overall, Age of Empires Definitive Edition was one of the games I was most looking forward to this year. It could have been so much better, it could have been so good, an actual return to form for Age of Empires, but whether it was Forgotten Empires, the developers, or Microsoft, the publisher, who messed this up, someone did, and at the end of the day, the end product is just not good enough. And you know, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed.